Before I begin, I would like to thank the scientific committee and all the people who have worked to organize this amazing event and gave us the opportunity to participate remotely. 3 years ago, my daughter Eva was born. I really enjoyed every moment of the birthing process, as my partner Elena and I spent more than 24 hours in the delivery room. At that time, as I was about to become a new parent, I was reading a book about the importance of the early years, the do's and don'ts of child rearing. So, among others, I read about the negative effects of screen exposure on infants and children. To make a long story short, a few months later, while we were making our family photo album, I realized that the first selfie of our baby was taken inside the delivery room, only some seconds after her first breath. And that was the moment when the spark ignited my curiosity to thoroughly investigate the potential effects of excessive screen time on infants and children. To introduce myself, I am Anastasios Christakis from Greece, father of 2 preschoolers. I am a data analyst focusing extensively on healthcare and the broader field of health for more than 15 years. For over a year now, I am also a PhD candidate at the University of Thessaly, where I'm researching the effects of screen exposure on preschool children. A step forward, please. Thank you. I have the privilege of collaborating with some outstanding academics there under the supervision of Assistant Professor Katerina Tosca. Next slide, please. Over the next few minutes, I will try to convince you about the significance of studying preschool children's screen time. I will also outline the existing guidelines in this area and compare them to the global reality. Following that, I will delve into the factors influencing screen exposure and the effects of excessive screen time on sleep and behavior. Last but not least, I will share our initial research findings from the pilot study we carried out. It's the previous slide now, I think. Previously. Okay, that's it. In recent years, there has been a global trend of governments allocating considerable funds towards early childhood development programs. This shift is based on the widely accepted understanding nowadays that nurturing and cultivating children's skills during their formative years can lead to substantial and long-term benefits for both individuals and society. I want to mention here that one of the pioneers who pointed out these benefits about 50 years ago was, of course, Maria Montessori. Next slide, please. During early childhood, especially in the first few years of life, children undergo a period of remarkably swift and flexible brain development. The experiences and interactions children have during these formative years play a crucial role in shaping the architecture of their brains, which in turn can have a lasting impact on their cognitive, emotional, and social development throughout their lives. Next slide, please. The modern world is becoming increasingly intertwined with new technologies, significantly sculpting daily life. Screens have become an indispensable part of our daily routines, impacting the way we work, communicate, and entertain ourselves. The exposure of children to screens from a very young age has become nearly unavoidable, whether through traditional digital media like television, or more commonly through other digital screens such as computers, smartphones, tablets, etc. The accessibility to these devices has rapidly increased throughout the developed world over the past few decades. The recent COVID-19 pandemic.
ये हो रहा था अभी 5 मिनट रुकने को बोला फिर भी चालू कर दिया हंसी होएगा तो प्रोग्राम
Sorry, if we can mute, if you can mute
I have some voice.
Please unmute.
Yeah,
please unmute your.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The recent COVID-19 pandemic, along with the resulting policies and the shift to spending more time at home, has intensified this trend. In addition, the pandemic has created new demands and habits in the digital communication and the distance education, affecting children to the greatest degree. Next slide, please. The younger generation, known as Generation Alpha, has embraced crucial changes. Born between 2010 and 2024, they are often referred to as the glass generation due to their unique characteristics. Children belonging to the Generation Alpha are digital natives, introduced to screens from the very first moments of their lives. They are global, as their exposure to technology knows no borders. Additionally, more than any previous generation, they are extensively connected to and influenced by their peers, breaking social, geographical, and demographic boundaries. They are also visual, as they prefer pictures or video summaries over written articles, making messages increasingly image-based. And of course, after all, they are mobile. Next slide, please. Regarding the guidelines for the exposure of preschool children to screens, it is necessary to begin from the World Health Organization report, where the guidelines for physical activity, sedentary behavior, mainly linked to screen time, and children's sleep are included. These guidelines apply to all healthy children under the age of 5, regardless of gender, cultural background, or socioeconomic status of families. Next slide, please. Here, I will only outline the guidelines related to screen exposure. So, for infants up to 1 year, as well as for children aged up to 2, screen use is not recommended at all. For children aged 2 to 5, screen time should not exceed 1 hour daily. It is mentioned that less screen time is better, and any screen time should be under parental supervision and exposure to quality content. It is also strictly recommended to avoid exposure to screens during meals and at least 1 hour before bedtime. And in any case, alternatives such as reading and storytelling should be encouraged instead of screen time. Next slide, please. Several societies and associations related to pediatrics have also issued guidelines on the exposure of preschool children to screens. Generally, these guidelines align with WHO policies, with the exception of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which recently set the limit for zero screen exposure to 18 months. Unfortunately, in most countries around the world, there are no clear guidelines for the exposure of preschool children to screens. This creates a significant gap between the optimal use of new technologies and the information that parents have about the non-harmful exposure of children to screens. Move on one step, please. It's surprising that warnings like the one you can see on the screen are included in almost all commercial products, but no one has ever bothered to inform parents and consumers about the dangers involved in exposing their children to screens such as TVs, tablets, or smartphones. Next slide, please. In the question, are the directives followed? The quick answer is no. The guidelines for preschool children's screen time are not being met. According to research worldwide, only 1 in 4 children under 2 years old and 1 in 3 children aged 2 to 5 years are adhering to the recommendations. 50 years ago in the US, children were first exposed to screens which were limited to TVs at the age of 4 years old. Today, the statistics from the States are alarming. 74% of children under 2 years old are exposed to TV screens, 35% to tablets, 49% to smartphones, and 12% to desktops or laptops. Unsurprisingly, older children have even higher rates of screen exposure. Next slide, please. The screen time of preschool children is influenced by various interconnected factors, which can be grouped into 4 levels, as illustrated in the image you can see. At an individual level, it's the level 1, screen time tends to increase as children grow older and can also be affected by biological factors, for instance, the gender. Moving to the interpersonal level, level 2, children's screen time is affected by their parents' screen time, income, and educational level, as well as their attitudes and beliefs about digital media exposure. Next, level 3, the digital home environment includes factors such as access to digital devices like smartphones and tablets, household rules concerning screen time, background TV exposure, and parental digital literacy. Finally, broader social, cultural, geographic, and environmental factors, it's the level 4, also influence children's screen time, including location, seasonal variation, as higher exposure is observed when the possibility for outdoor activities is limited, and the availability of public facilities and recreational areas, particularly in large urban areas. I would like to make a special mention here of a new term, technoference, which refers to the frequent interruption of routines, play, or interactions due to the use of digital media by the parents or caregivers. Next slide, please. Excessive screen time during preschool years can negatively impact children's health and development. The consequences may affect a child's early development stage, typically within the first 5 years of life, and may also have long-term effects that manifest later in life. These effects include adopting a sedentary lifestyle leading to weight gain, delayed motor and cognitive skills development, reduced psychosocial and physical well-being, increased likelihood of aggressive behavior, language and emotional disorders, potential for eating disorders. Finally, it can result sleep and behavioral disorders. Next slide, please. In the realm of children's sleep problems, current research literature emphasizes that the longer preschoolers are exposed to screens, the less they sleep. It's also noteworthy that children exposed to screens for over 4 hours tends to take longer to fall asleep. Studies show that for every additional hour of screen viewing beyond a certain point, the likelihood of sleep disturbances increases by more than 12%. On the whole, more screen time significantly correlates with lower sleep quality. Next slide, please. Continuing, behavioral issues are more noticeable and thus easier to observe. Studies indicate that children who spend more time in front of screens tend to have lower levels of communication with others, including children, and are more likely to experience attention deficit and hyperactivity problems. Furthermore, research suggests that longer screen time is significantly linked to both external behavioral problems like aggression and inattention, and internal behavioral problems such as anxiety and depression. Next slide, please. Now I would like to share a concise summary of the initial findings from our pilot study, focusing only on the most noteworthy aspects. Next slide, please. Regarding the methodology, it is a pilot study with a convenient sample. 42 parents or caregivers of preschool children participated. We administrated questionnaires to record screen time and all relative information, physical activity, sleep habits, and children behavior. In the context of this pilot study, we have also translated and adapted the questionnaire on screen exposure among preschool children for the Greek population. Next slide, please. The first finding concerns the statistically significant difference between the time preschoolers spend in front of a screen on weekdays and weekends. As it can be seen, on weekends, this time is significantly longer. Next slide, please. The previous slide presented the overall averages. However, what if we analyze the age groups separately, such as 2 to 4 and 4 to 6? It seems that for the younger ages, the exposure time is short and compliant with the guidelines. On the other hand, for the older ages, the exposure time is notably high, exceeding 2 hours on average during weekends. Next slide, please. We gathered data on various screen-related habits at home and found some compelling insights. For example, 1 out of every 4 children is exposed to screens without supervision. 1 out of every 3 parents rarely or never discusses their child's screen viewing habits. The frequency of having the television on during meals or when the child is in the room varies, but it's not insignificant. Next slide, please. We also asked parents their opinions on the potential consequences of excessive screen time on their children. The responses were generally straightforward. Behavior problems, eye problems, cognitive and emotional development, and so on. Nevertheless, it is interesting that they underestimated the impact it might have on their children's sleep. It's the small white sphere at the tail end of the figure. Next slide, please. The survey also reveals a remarkable finding. While most parents believe they understand the impact of children's screen time, over 85% expressed a desire to consult with a specialist or healthcare professional regarding recommendations for managing screen time. Next slide, please. Although our sample size was limited at this point, our study validates the link between increased screen time in preschool children and several concerning outcomes. These include reduced sleep duration, lower sleep quality, delayed sleep onset and daytime sleepiness, especially during the weekends, and the manifestation of behavioral problems such as temper tantrums, fights, etc. Before I conclude, I would like to mention the main limitation of this study. It is in our knowledge, and we are trying to figure out ways to reduce any biases that parent or caregivers might have, which could affect our results. They are not all honest, it's clear for us. Next slide, please. In summary, too much screen time can negatively impact the sleep and behavior of preschool children. It's important for parents to seek out reliable information and establish limits on screen usage. It's time for health professionals, preschool educators, and researchers to take action and minimize both immediate and long-term effects of excessive screen exposure for preschoolers. Next slide, please. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I am available to answer any question or provide further clarification on the topic now or at any time through the email address you can see on the screen.